I'm going to start off with telling you 3 things that I can definitely tell you about my grandmother. Number 1, she came from a huge family. Number 2, she loved lilacs. And number 3, when she was 54, she was diagnosed with a rare neurodegenerative brain disorder. Unfortunately, I don't know much more than that. And for some reason, I've always felt kind of bad asking about her, even though I should never feel that way. My parents never made me feel that way, but it just felt off. I never met her because she died back in 2000, before I was even born. It feels so awful to know so little about somebody that should have been a pivotal point in your life. But it's almost harder to express how to miss someone you've never met. After picking this topic, I realized I didn't really know why I chose it, besides the fact that I was curious and I wanted to know more. All I know is that some disease took my grandma from me, and I didn't realize how something I knew so little about could affect my life so greatly. I'm going to start off with a picture of my grandma. The disease that my grandma was diagnosed with was olivopontocerebellar atrophy. It's a rare neurological condition that affects many parts of the brain. According to the National Organization of Rare Disorders, OPCA is used to describe a group of disorders that affect the central nervous system and are termed neurodegenerative because they result in deterioration of different parts of the brain. Imagine a life of slurred speech, balance problems, and an inability to perform the most basic tasks of life. These are all symptoms of olivopontocerebellar atrophy. It's so rare that for every 100,000, only 3 to 5 people are affected. Or, in other words, only 13,500 people in the United States of America are affected every year, and they still go uncured. So today, I'm going to use the term OPCA rather than say the entire thing for the sake of both you and I. And I'm going to go through not only what the disease is, how it affected my grandma, and how it affects me today. Okay. So what is OPCA? This is a normal brain. There's nothing wrong with it. As you can see, most components of it are quite large and don't really seem to be diminished. This is the brain of a patient with OPCA. As you can see, the different parts are kind of squished and not really at their full potential. OPCA is defined as a neurodegenerative brain disorder where neurons in different parts of the brain break down and destroy brain functions. Degenerative, according to Cambridge University Dictionary, means illness in which the body or a part of the body gradually stops working. There are multiple components in this brain that stop working, and it all causes the pain in the patient of OPCA. Let's walk through the different parts of the brain affected, what they do, and how they're vital to a person's quality of life. First, the cerebellum. According to Cleveland Clinic, an online organization for medical research, the cerebellum is in charge of voluntary movement. So it kind of makes sure that you have your balance, and any complications with the cerebellum can cause ataxia, which takes away your loss of coordination, your walking, and the ability to use your hands. Next is the pons. The pons wires your brain to the spinal cord, and it houses nerves that are vital for muscle control and other involuntary movements, such as breathing, sleeping, and then naturally waking up. Most patients with OPCA are not able to breathe very well, and they have a lot of problems with their sleep schedules. And lastly, the inferior olives. These share space with the pons and the brainstem and is the direct communicator between the cerebellum and the rest of the brain. The olives work with motor and sensory input, so it tells our brain how to move and when to move. Without it, you can't walk at all, and most patients with OPCA end up in a wheelchair at the end of their lives. Let's go into how it affected my grandma. My grandma was one of the sweetest ladies, and that's what I've heard from about every person that's ever told me about her. However, in 1993, she was diagnosed with this disease, but they had no idea what it was. The only sign that they had was that her speech was really diminishing. And at that point, they didn't know that she was sick, and she had a really important job of the city secretary. So she was answering phone calls and talking to people and answering questions every day, And sadly, many people assumed that she was an alcoholic because of her speech slurring. Which, it didn't help that her family also owned a restaurant/bar, which did not help her case. As her disease progressed, she had to start using a cane because her balance was going really bad. And then she had to use a walker, and then a motorized scooter, and then eventually she had no function in any of her limbs and she was unable to move, so she had to be pushed around in a wheelchair. With that, her speech completely diminished, and she was not only not able to talk, but she also was unable to write, cutting off all communication with the outside world. My mom describes it as her being trapped inside her body, and as she had just started dating my dad, it was really hard for her to get to know my dad's mother because she wasn't able to communicate, and that was really hard for her. It was also really difficult on my Aunt Kelly because when she was a senior in high school, she graduated, and this was about the time that her mom got diagnosed. And she became the sole carer for my grandma after my dad and his brother were off at college. So my dad and his siblings, this was affected to them pretty early in life. She died on January 30th, 2000 at 54, where her body completely shut down. Nobody wanted to see her go, but you have to imagine the pain and distress that takes a toll on a person that can't talk or do anything for themselves or communicate with the people that they love. It really shows that she was alive, but not really living. It was thought that she had most of her cognitive ability. She was able to understand what my parents and everyone was saying, but she just couldn't respond. They could see emotion in her eyes, and that was it. This is my dad. I found out that this is possibly genetic, and that it could affect my dad, his siblings, me, or my siblings. And that's kind of hard to think about because my dad's kind of reaching the age that my grandma was when she was diagnosed. There's no cure for this disease, just treatment to help improve quality of life. According to New Oxford American Dictionary, quality of life means the standard of health, comfort, and happiness, which is not what my grandmother experienced. Once the disease progresses, OPCA patients cannot eat, sleep, walk, or talk, which drastically depletes their quality of life. Although OPCA will never. So today I went over the disease, how it affected my grandmother, and how it still affects me today. And although OPCA will likely never be cured in my lifetime, researching this, talking to my parents about my grandmother's life, and sharing it with all of you has really helped me.